Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Racing Productions MC and producer. And welcome to Team Racing YouTube channel, Alex Koma. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
It's certainly a pleasure for us to have you here. So I want to start this off with just having you introduce yourself to our viewers watching and give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, I'm Alex Koma. As of about 2 weeks ago, I'm the new Loose Lips reporter at Washington City Paper, the alt weekly here in town. I am a DC native. I grew up in Fairfax County and have sort of been reporting all around the region since then. Before that, I was at the Washington Business Journal covering local business development and housing issues. But I've also had stops in Arlington and Prince William County, Virginia. So I've local media veteran, such that it is.
I love that. Love that. Well, tell me, how did you become the new Loose Lips columnist? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, well, thankfully, the good folks at the city paper recognized some of what I was doing at the WBJ, which had a lot of overlap with what I do now. It
Mhm.
won't stun anyone to learn that even though Loose Lips is a very politics and government focused column, a lot of what I was doing before, didn't have much to do with the outright politics of the city, except for the fact that it touched on housing and affordable housing, which, as anyone knows these days, tends to become political very quickly and is
Yeah.
something that is on the minds, I think, of renters like myself very acutely. So I spent a lot of time at the WBJ writing about, the new developments that were going up all across the city and how, the city had a role in playing to, had a role to play to ensure that they're affordable or more often,
Mhm.
falling a little bit short of some of those goals. That often led me to be in contact with a lot of folks, both within Mayor Muriel Bowser's administration, but also the DC Council. And since covering both of those entities is very much the bread and butter of what Loose Lips and the city paper does,
Yep.
they, I think, recognize that there's a lot of overlap, and they figured that I'd get a chance to do, the stuff that I had been, occupying some of my time at the Business
Mhm.
Journal, where I covered the entire DC region, and now focus specifically all of my time on the district.
Certainly, certainly. Well, now that you're in this position, talk to me a little bit about what you'd like to maintain about the column, especially as it has to do with previous columnists and, what Loose Lips is like and what you want to do differently, if anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would start simply by saying that if anyone has read, Loose Lips in the past, they know that it has an extremely long history dating back to the founding of City Paper. We're
Mhm.
entering our 40th year, in fact, and Loose Lips has been around pretty much since then. And so I come to this with enormous respect for the folks who came before me, not only Mitch Riles, who is my immediate predecessor, who is now the managing editor at City Paper, but also, all of the many names that have, graced our masthead up to and including a sitting DC council member. So,
Mhm.
there's a lot of history here, and the tone that Loose Lips has always taken is one that is a little bit snarky, but perhaps more than anything is, skeptical of authority, questions authority, and questions what the DC government and lawmakers are doing in the name of the people they represent. And that is something that I never want to lose sight of. The fact that I'm always trying to punch up, as it were, and
Yeah.
aim the column's focus at the people who have power in the city, and sort of illuminate what it is that they're doing with that power. That has always been at the heart of the column, and I don't expect that will go anywhere. If there's anything new that I would like to do with it, I would say I touched on housing at the very start. And when I made the pitch for this job to my editor, that said, if you hire me, that is sort of the one issue that over the course of my career, I've spent a ton of time focusing on. And that would be no different, at Loose Lips. And, I have, done a little of that so far and look forward to expanding on that work, simply because I think anybody who rents in the city knows that it is not a terribly pleasant prospect. And so there are a lot of stories to be told about the technical policy-focused reasons why, but also the political ones and the way that overlaps with the way the city government works on the inside. And so, the city paper has a long history of writing about housing issues as well. And so to the extent that we can blend those two focuses at Loose Lips, I'd really like to do so.
Certainly, certainly. Well, since you've been there now for the period that you've been, what topics or subjects would you say has gotten the most feedback?
Yeah, well, as anyone doesn't know, it's election season in DC.
Exactly.
We got a primary coming up in June. The Democratic primary that will effectively decide not only the race for mayor, but several important council races. And so, a lot of the reporting that I've been doing so far and, interest that I've been receiving from candidates and readers, everyone who's reached out, since I've started here, has been about, this upcoming primary and what that's going to say about the direction of the city moving forward. In 2018, we didn't have an especially competitive mayoral race. No one really chose to step up and run against Mayor Bowser. That is certainly not the case this year, where we have not one but two council members who are interested in challenging her. And even more than that, the candidates running for council as well, on many ways, they agree on many of these issues, and it is distinctly in a, I think, more leftward direction than the city has moved in the past. And so I think we're about to witness, I think the council has very steadily been moving left over these last 2 years, and there's going to be a real debate for voters to consider in the upcoming race, whether that's a process that they want to continue and see a continued focus on, additional social services in particular that candidates have recently pushed on the council and are continuing to. And I'll be interested to see it as much as anyone else.
Certainly, me too. And, being a part of this channel, we have been able to have so many conversations with so many different people in DC politics, local politics altogether. So if any of the viewers are watching who are Loose Lips readers, you are interested in DC politics, go ahead and check out our election playlist that you'll find here on this YouTube channel, because we've done interviews with many of the candidates running this year, mayor, DC council, everything. So you can go ahead and check that out when you're done watching this interview. So let's talk about some of the things in the current news. What's going on? If someone were to go to Loose Lips now, what are the things that they would see at the top? And let's talk about a little bit of them.
Sure. Well, I in fact, just before getting on the call with you, published a story that was detailing the DC auditor, which is a position a lot of people might not know about. Her responsibility in the city government is to basically, take a look at what the council is doing, what legislation, they're passing, and how the city government is working, and to say, these are my recommendations for improving it. And she issued this report recently that simply said the council isn't listening to her and is essentially ignoring her, which, she put in very technical terms, but is nonetheless a pretty clear statement, from a very important position in city government about, what the council is or is not doing. And so that column is in fact about half an hour old, but is I hope an interesting read on sort of some of the things that are going on. There's always going to be some internecine fights within city government, and this is yet another example of that.
Certainly. Let's talk about the mayoral election coming up. And so with Mayor Bowser now being challenged by members of the council, give me maybe your outlook on the race, what you expect to happen, what could be surprising, what could be an upset, and if there are any changes, what the next, years of DC politics will look like if the mayor does change.
Absolutely. Well, I would say simply from the question of the outlook on the race, Robert White was the first councilman to jump in the race. And, you may recognize his name because in 2016, he was the one who beat Vincent Orange, who at the time was embroiled in, let's call it a very minor scandal, where he was trying to take over leadership of the DC Chamber of Commerce at the same time as he was, holding office. That was, I think, a very memorable race for a lot of people. And so Robert White has increased in prominence since then to the point where he's ready to, make this leap, and run for mayor. He's not been shy about criticizing Muriel Bowser thus far. Essentially, in all my conversations with him, he has painted it as a failure of leadership on many, aspects. So he is running hard against the mayor on her management, not only of issues that we've already discussed, such as housing and affordable housing, but also on the management of schools, particularly during COVID, on the management of violent crime in the city. And he's making an argument that these are issues that voting voters he speaks with are not particularly pleased with. The mayor, by all accounts, is popular. We look at opinion polls of her, and they say that as much. I think some of her latest numbers had close to 60% of respondents saying they liked the mayor, and so this race will sort of be a test of whether that is indeed the case. Robert White is here making this bet that between the disruptions of COVID and some deep-seated issues, that popularity will turn out to be skin deep, as it were. But the race is complicated by the fact that he's not the only one running. I'm sure he would prefer if he was, but his fellow councilman, Trayon White, who represents Ward 8, is also running. I'm a bit surprised, I think, and many other folks were, that he was, jumping into this race simply because he had just won re-election. He didn't have a big, showy announcement, sort of the way that Robert White did. He announced on Instagram of all places. And so, I think that, has people, still a bit curious to see how much of a factor he's going to be in the race. He, in the last campaign finance reports, didn't report raising any money. And so, that is making people, I think, question, whether he's going to make it to the point where he actually appears on the ballot. If he does, that really makes things complicated, because it's one thing if a voter has to decide between what I know and the guy promising change versus two different candidates. And, as much as we like to believe that everyone in the city follows politics as closely as we do, I have to imagine the fact that they both have the same last name is going to be
exactly
for some voters. They're very different. Trayon White has had more than his fair share of controversies that Robert White has largely stayed away from. So there's a very real possibility that people may conflate the two of them. I don't imagine that either of them is particularly pleased that the other is on the ballot. I'm sure they'd love a one-on-one contest with the mayor. And if Robert White, who is doing fairly well in fundraising reports for now at least, can make this a one-on-one race, if Trayon doesn't make it to the ballot, then hey, anything's possible. As soon as you start saying vote for change, that's a more promising pitch. Oftentimes, especially in a period of disruption as we are now. So the person who wins does have a chance to change the way that the business is done in the city. They have a major opportunity to be the mayor who is let us hope, seeing DC out of the worst period of the pandemic and into a recovery, and we'll have a chance to shape what that recovery looks like. So it will be a lot of fun to watch between now and June.
Awesome. I can't wait to see how it all plays out. Now, I want to bring up a little piece of gossip that is that I do want to talk about, because when I went to Howard, I volunteered at this place in my honors program at Martha's Table. So I do want to talk a little bit about the leadership disruption that's going on there. And if you could shed some light on that, because I know Loose Lips has covered it. So for anyone who is not aware, please enlighten our viewers.
Yeah, well, this was news that broke, I believe it was last week, that Kim Ford, who runs, or at least ran, Martha's Table, an organization that focuses on food insecurity and hunger in the district, I think they've been operating since the 80s. So a nonprofit with a long history, and certainly one that's among the most well-regarded charities in the city. You know, the Obamas both volunteered there pretty frequently. I believe Kamala Harris was there recently as well. So a place that's well-run and well-regarded. But yet Kim Ford, who just ran it, sent this letter to, announcing her resignation, saying that, after just 3 years or so running the place, she felt the need to step away, and chalked that up entirely to the, abusive treatment she felt she suffered at the hands of the group's board of directors. She didn't really get into details about quite, what formed that tick, except to say that she often felt as if, the board was, using derogatory language to describe many of the people that, the nonprofit serves, that they were, not affording her the chance to do her job, and that when she pushed back against these efforts, that she was, criticized, often in absentia. She felt like she didn't have a chance to make her case before the board, and so decided, with all of that evidence, to simply walk away. And that's a heck of a job, especially for someone like Kim Ford, who had spent time in the White House, who had made a run for DC for the Eleanor Holmes Norton spot, in Congress. I mean, she's a prominent figure in the city. And so, this is a big deal to see her not just walking away, but doing so, very publicly, and, taking the board of directors to task on the way out, basically saying that the composition of the board should be altered to better reflect who the community is serving. And it's certainly not no one who's on that board. It's the Attorney General, Carl Racine, head of a very prominent development company called Horning Brothers. And it's chaired by Ellis Carr, who runs Capital Impact Partners, which is another prominent community development financing organization in the city. For their part, they've not addressed her accusations thus far. They've said they wish her well, and say they'll look for a new director, but they really haven't offered much clarity on what that looks like. And there are a lot of folks, I believe it was the Anacostia Coordinating Council, that was saying that they, wanted a meeting with Martha's Table board to understand what's going on over there in the wake of all of this, because I think they are understandably concerned.
I can imagine. Well, for anyone who's watching, we've also done an interview with Kim Ford and Martha's Table, so you can check that out here on this channel, and you'll see me saying Martha's Vineyard at least 3 times in that interview. I don't know what was on my mind there. Alex, it's been such a pleasure getting to talk with you today. Before I let you go, how can people follow you, find out more, learn more, and sending tips to loose lips if they want to?
Well, we encourage everyone not only to read us at WashingtonCityPaper.com. It is completely free to do so. You'll find no paywall there. But you can also follow us on Twitter at WCP. And you can see my Twitter handle as well, which is at Alex Koma WCP, and my email, which is akoma at WashingtonCityPaper.com. As you say, we're open to tips. We cannot do this particular job without the help of people who live around the district, who are, our eyes and ears, seeing stuff out there. So by all means, our virtual door is open. We want to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And to our viewers, those links will be in the description below. So go ahead and check that out. Alex, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you for being here with me today.
Yes, same here. Thanks so much for everything you do.
And to those who are watching, please follow Team Racing Productions on all forms of social media, like, comment, and subscribe. And most of all, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.